The day my daughter Madison found the envelope was the day everything changed. Hidden in my father's old desk drawer, behind dusty tax files and obsolete warranty cards, she discovered a notarized document that shattered what little trust I had left. My parents, Margaret and Harold, had rewritten their wills. And in a chilling twist, they named my ex-husband Nathan as the primary guardian of my youngest child, Ethan, should anything happen to me. I stood there, staring at the paper in silence, while Madison, only 16, whispered, "Mom, did you know about this?" No, I didn't. But suddenly everything made sense. The strange visits, the overbearing questions, the fake concern. It wasn't love, it was a trap. They were trying to take my son. And they'd been working with Nathan behind my back. But if they thought I'd go quietly, they didn't know me at all. I wasn't about to lose my child without a fight. My name is Brooke Anderson, and at 34, I never imagined I'd be fighting my own family for custody of my son. I was a single mother of two, Madison, my resilient 16-year-old daughter, and Ethan, my gentle 10-year-old boy who loved Legos and bedtime stories about dragons. We lived in a modest rental home just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I worked full-time as a nurse practitioner, balancing patient care with after-school pickups and family dinners I fought to make. Life hadn't always been like this. I was once married to Nathan Whitmore, a man who started off charming and turned controlling by the time Madison was in preschool. He gaslit me constantly, questioned my decisions as a mother, and made me feel like I was never enough. When I finally left him 6 years ago, he played the victim to everyone who'd listen, including my parents. That was the real betrayal. While I struggled to rebuild my life, Nathan managed to convince Margaret and Harold that I was unstable, overworked, and unfit. My parents had always preferred Nathan's polished image over my quiet strength. They saw his expensive suits and confident tone, but endured the bruises. For years, I brushed it off. I wanted to believe my parents meant well. I told myself their favoritism was just generational misunderstanding. After all, they helped with Ethan's school fund and bought him birthday presents I couldn't afford. I thought they were just trying to stay involved. But when they started inviting Nathan to family dinners without telling me, I should have known. Madison was the only one who ever saw through it. "They think he's some kind of savior," she once said, rolling her eyes. "It's like they forgot what he put you through." She was right. They had forgotten. Or worse, they had chosen to. The day Madison found the envelope, we'd been cleaning out my father's office at my parents' request. He'd suffered a mild stroke and moved into assisted living. My mother had given me the key and said, "Take anything you want before we donate the rest." I hadn't expected much. Old tax returns, medical bills, faded photographs. But tucked behind a stack of outdated insurance folders was an envelope labeled guardianship. Madison opened it before I could stop her. Inside was a notarized amendment to their wills, drafted only 6 months prior. It named Nathan as Ethan's legal guardian in the event of my death or incapacitation. No mention of Madison, no alternate options, just Nathan. I remember sitting on the floor of that dusty office, my hands trembling as I read the document. It wasn't just betrayal, it was war. And I knew then I couldn't play nice anymore. My parents and my ex-husband were conspiring to take my son. They had underestimated me for the last time. In the days that followed, I tried to act normal. I still got Ethan ready for school, made pancakes on Saturdays, and answered my mother's daily check-ins with polite indifference. But inside, my mind was spinning. Every conversation, every visit, now seemed like part of a coordinated strategy. They were watching me, studying me, preparing the pieces of a story I never agreed to. I thought back to that weekend 6 months ago, when my mom insisted on taking Ethan to the mountains. "You need a break," she said, waving off my reluctance. "Let Nathan come along. He misses his son." I remember feeling uneasy about it, but too exhausted to argue. Now I saw it for what it was, an opportunity for them to play happy family, without me. There was also the school tuition. My father had called one afternoon out of the blue, saying he wanted to help. "This is about Ethan's future," he'd said, Let us take care of it. At the time, I'd felt grateful, relieved even. But now I saw it as another thread in the web they were weaving. They were building the case. Ethan thrived when Nathan and my parents were involved, and I was the obstacle in the way. It wasn't just paranoia, it was pattern. Even Madison noticed it. One evening while we were doing dishes, she said quietly, "They're trying to erase you, Mom, piece by piece." Then came the call that changed everything. My attorney, Elise, left a voicemail asking me to call back immediately. When I did, her tone was calm but urgent. "We've received an anonymous tip," she said. "A draft petition is circulating. It's not official yet, but your name is being mentioned in a potential guardianship review for Ethan." I felt the blood drain from my face. Elise explained that the draft was framed as a concern for Ethan's emotional stability and long-term welfare. It referenced unnamed family members who claimed I was overwhelmed, unsupported, and unable to provide a consistent environment. The language was vague but familiar, words I'd heard echoed by my parents for years. "You do too much, Brooke. Why don't you let Nathan take over sometimes? Maybe you're not thinking clearly." They were laying the groundwork, slowly, legally. And they'd waited until my father was in assisted living, when my time and energy were already stretched thin. This wasn't just an idea in their heads, it was a plan, one with signatures and notaries and legal weight. And Nathan, my ex-husband who'd never once paid his court-ordered support, who canceled weekend visits half the time, he was their knight in shining armor. They were making their move. I was being set up. If I didn't act fast, I would lose my son. Ethan would be taken by the very people who had spent years undermining me, and I would be painted as the villain in my own life. Not this time. I pulled Madison aside and told her everything. I expected her to cry, to panic, maybe even to break down. But instead she listened in silence, her jaw set. When I finished, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Then we fight, Mom." That was the moment I knew I wasn't alone. Madison became my second set of eyes and ears. She started documenting everything. Every strange message from my mother, every accidental drop-in from Nathan, every time they tried to isolate Ethan or frame me as forgetful or unstable. She downloaded a call recording app on her phone and kept a journal, logging the exact times and dates of interactions, facial expressions, and tone. Her detail was surgical. Meanwhile, I knew I couldn't rely on the family lawyer my parents had recommended years ago. I needed someone outside the system they knew. I hired a new attorney, Brielle, a tenacious woman known for winning difficult custody battles. She listened, took notes, and immediately recommended I bring in a private investigator to build a profile on Nathan, his gambling debt, missed visitations, and former coworkers who'd witnessed his temper. While clearing out a folder on my old laptop, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. Right after I left Nathan, during the messiest months of my separation, I had started a private audio journal on a secure cloud account. I was too scared and ashamed to talk to anyone, so I recorded voice memos. I had also taken photos of bruises I never reported, screenshots of threatening texts, receipts from therapy sessions, even the intake forms from a domestic violence shelter I never checked into. It had all been archived and forgotten. Now, I unearthed every file. When I opened the folder and pressed play on the first memo, my own trembling voice whispering through tears about how afraid I was, I broke down. But then, I wiped my face, backed up the files, and handed everything to Brielle. She was stunned. "This is a gold mine," she said. "You've got contemporaneous records. This isn't just emotion. This is evidence." I wasn't just building a defense. I was mounting a case. That same week, I received a suspicious letter from a social worker requesting a home wellness check. The timing was too convenient. Brielle reviewed the language and confirmed my fears. They're preparing to file, probably within the next few weeks. I didn't wait. With Madison's support and the backing of my legal team, I filed first. A formal petition for sole custody of Ethan. No shared guardianship. No default parental rights to Nathan. I attached the audio memos, the investigator's findings, Madison's logbook, and a full psychological report that detailed the lasting emotional damage Nathan had caused during our marriage. It was my turn to set the narrative. And I wasn't going to lose this battle, not because I was the loudest, but because this time, I was the one writing the truth. The petition I filed was sharp, thorough, and unapologetically honest. It named Nathan and both of my parents as co-conspirators in an effort to destabilize my role as Ethan's primary caregiver. It outlined their secret meetings, financial manipulations, and the years-long campaign to frame me as incapable. Every piece of evidence was attacked. The petition didn't tiptoe around feelings. It told the truth, without flinching. The response was instant. My mother showed up at my doorstep the next morning, red-eyed and trembling, holding a plate of still warm cookies like we were in a Hallmark movie. "How could you do this to us?" she whispered, like I was the villain, as if she hadn't sat across from me for years, pretending everything was fine, while plotting to give my son to a man who once made me afraid to sleep with the lights off. I didn't take the cookies. My father didn't bother with tears. Instead, he left me a voicemail, hissing with righteous fury. "You're dragging our family name through the mud. You're making enemies you can't afford. Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life?" I didn't respond. His threats didn't scare me anymore, because I wasn't the same Brooke they used to dismiss with a sigh and a shake of the head. Nathan's lawyer fired off a cease and desist letter filled with performative outrage. Brielle smirked and called it exactly what it was: noise. But none of them understood something critical. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't an emotional overreaction. This was justice. This was years of silence, unraveling into action. And strangely, through the chaos, I didn't feel hatred. I felt clarity. I could finally see it all for what it was. The family dinners that were always more about appearance than connection. The thoughtful gifts that came with strings. The offers to help that positioned me as incompetent. It had never been about love, it was about control. Their silence, their complicity, their manipulation. It had always been deliberate. And I was finally done pretending otherwise. Madison stood by me through it all. She never once questioned my decision. When the court date arrived, she wore a simple blue dress and carried Ethan's favorite green dragon plush in her bag, just in case he needed comfort. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, knowing my daughter was in the front row, and the truth was on my side. The courtroom was cold, and the tension was thick. My parents sat on the left side, stiff and grim. Nathan came in, wearing an expensive suit and a smug smile. He nodded toward me like we were old friends about to have a civilized chat. I didn't acknowledge him. When I took the stand, I told my story plainly. I talked about the years I spent hiding bruises under makeup, the panic attacks, the time I drove in circles for hours because I couldn't go home while Nathan was angry. I explained the difference between financial instability and emotional abuse. I let the facts speak. Madison's testimony came next. She described the time Nathan screamed at me over a burnt casserole, the way my mother always dismissed my tears with, "Well, he's still Ethan's father." The guilt, the fear, the gaslighting. She was calm, direct, and heartbreaking. Across the courtroom, Nathan tried his usual charm, smiling at the judge, tossing in self-deprecating humor. But charm only works when there's no counterweight. This time, the weight of the truth was too much. My parents wouldn't meet my eyes. Nathan kept fidgeting. And I sat there, unwavering, because I knew the evidence was undeniable. This time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was protecting my children. And they were worth everything. The court case stretched across 3 grueling weeks. Each day felt like peeling off another layer of skin, raw, vulnerable, but necessary. I sat through every minute, steady and silent, while my attorney led with precision. The digital journal became our foundation. My voice memos from years ago, quaking, tearful, yet undeniable, played in open court. One entry recorded Nathan threatening, "I'll make sure you never see your kids again." Another, taken the night I left, described the bruises he left on my ribs and the panic I felt driving away with Madison in the back seat. Therapist notes confirmed my diagnoses of trauma and anxiety. My financial advisor supplied bank records showing my parents had transferred nearly $18,000, 0 cents, to Nathan in the past year. Disguised as family support, rereading each page with visible disbelief. Nathan's lawyers tried to pivot. They painted me as unstable, overworked, overly emotional. But under cross-examination, their story collapsed. Madison's calm, measured testimony cut through everything. She described the years she spent watching Nathan demean me, the way my parents would nod sympathetically but do nothing, and how she often played the peacemaker between adults. By week 2, Margaret's polished composure cracked. On the stand, she tried to justify herself with phrases like, "We just wanted what was best for Ethan." But when the judge asked her why she hadn't once attended a school meeting, she had no answer. When asked how often she babysat, helped with appointments, or checked on Ethan's health, she stammered, "Nathan said he had it under control." The courtroom fell silent. My father, Harold, refused to testify altogether. He didn't want to get dragged into the drama, which the judge noted in the official court summary as an indication of unwillingness to engage in his grandson's well-being. On the final day, we returned to court for the ruling. I sat between my attorney and Madison, who gripped Ethan's plush dragon in her lap like a quiet promise. The judge looked directly at me, then at Nathan, and then at my parents. His decision was clear. I was granted full legal and physical custody of Ethan, effective immediately. Nathan was issued a restraining order, no contact with me or the children, without a court-appointed monitor. Any violations would result in immediate legal action. The judge even went a step further, issuing a court warning to my parents. Any future interference in my parental decisions or contact with Nathan regarding Ethan would be treated as harassment and subject to court review. It was over. They had lost. But the real victory didn't come in that courtroom. It came afterward, quiet, powerful, and lasting. While Nathan spent his days sulking and posting vague threats online, I focused on building something that mattered. With Madison's help, I started a support group for other single mothers navigating custody warfare. We named it Dragon, Defend, Rise, Advocate, Grow, Own, Nurture. It was her idea, inspired by Ethan's love for dragons and our own journey of survival and transformation. We held weekly meetings at a community center and soon added an online forum. Word spread. Women came with binders of custody papers, stories of legal manipulation, fear of retaliation. We didn't promise miracles. We offered information, strategy, and a place to speak without shame. Within 3 months, we had over 500 members. I spoke on panels. I was interviewed on a local radio show. One day, a woman approached me in the grocery store, tears in her eyes, and said, "You don't know me, but your story saved me. I left him because of you." My silence was gone. My power was mine again. And Nathan? He faded. His threats lost momentum, his charm lost its sheen, and his name became a warning, not a weapon. As for my parents, they never apologized. They sent birthday cards to Ethan with no return address. But he didn't ask to see them, and I didn't force the issue. Madison once asked if I missed them. I said, I missed the people I thought they were. Because the truth is, my family didn't break me. They showed me where I end and where they stop. And in that space, I built something unbreakable. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the North Carolina Women's Summit, telling my story to an audience of 300. I wore a simple navy dress, the same one I wore to court the day I got full custody of Ethan. My palms didn't sweat. My knees didn't shake. My voice was clear, steady, certain. Madison introduced me with the confidence of someone twice her age. She called me her hero. I barely held back tears when she hugged me before stepping aside. Ethan sat in the front row, dragon plushie tucked under his arm. He clapped louder than anyone when I finished speaking. I told them everything. About the silent years, the betrayal, the envelope, and the courtroom. I talked about the dragon group, how it began with pain and turned into purpose. I told them about the nights I cried in my car after work, unsure if I could keep going, and the morning I woke up and knew I had no choice. My voice no longer trembled. I had become someone I barely recognized, strong, centered, unshakable. My parents hadn't spoken to me since the court ruling. No apology, no explanation, just silence. But I didn't mourn that loss anymore. Some relationships are better loved from a distance. The hope I once had for their approval had been replaced with something more durable. Self-respect. Nathan moved 2 states away. No more surprise visits. No more lawyer letters. His social media disappeared, and word through the grapevine was that he was living with a cousin and barely working. His custody attempts had stopped completely. But I never let my guard down. I kept every file, every voicemail, every transcript, not to dwell, not to live in the past, but to remember, to remind myself what I survived, to teach other women what to watch for, what to trust, what to document. Madison became a force of her own. She started mentoring younger girls at dragon meetings, girls whose mothers were still in the middle of legal battles or emotional breakdowns. She'd sit with them, listen, and say things like, "You're allowed to feel angry. That doesn't make you ungrateful." She got a part-time job at a bookstore and used her paycheck to buy journals for the women in our group. She believed in stories, in telling them. Ethan started drawing again. His favorite subject was still dragons, but they looked different now. They weren't trapped in cages or behind bars. They weren't breathing fire and fear. They soared, above mountains, over oceans, smiling. Sometimes he drew one with a crown. When I asked who it was, he smiled and said, "It's you, Mom." We weren't just surviving anymore. We were rebuilding, on truth, not illusion. Our family, the 3 of us, had become something new, not patched up, not stitched together, whole. Madison had strength I wished I'd had at her age. Ethan had innocence that managed to stay intact, not because he didn't see the darkness, but because he saw how we came through it. And me? I finally understood that the version of myself I once buried to make others comfortable was the very one who saved my children. The quiet girl, the one who wrote everything down, the one who never stopped loving, even when she wasn't loved back. That girl, she became a warrior. And she's never going back. A year after the court ruling, I hosted Thanksgiving in our little rental home. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and cinnamon, and Ethan was in charge of setting the table. Madison insisted on making the stuffing from scratch, armed with a recipe she found online and a determination that reminded me so much of myself at her age, only stronger. We invited 3 other mothers from Dragon and their children. No tension, no silence laced with judgment. Just laughter, shared stories, and the kind of honesty I had once believed didn't belong at a holiday table. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't afraid someone would make a backhanded comment about my parenting or pretend not to remember the pain I lived through. This was real. Madison carved the turkey while Ethan said grace, mumbling through his missing front tooth. I looked around the table, and I didn't feel loss. I felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because we were free. That Christmas, Madison gave me a gift wrapped in glittery blue paper. Inside was a framed photo of the 3 of us at the dragon picnic. She'd added her own caption in bold marker. We're enough. And we were. Not despite what we'd lost, but because of it. A few weeks later, a card arrived in the mail from my parents. No return address, no apology, just a single line, "Homosode, hope you're well." I read it once and placed it in the drawer. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel moved. I felt nothing at all. Because healing doesn't always come with apologies, and closure doesn't require a conversation. Sometimes, silence is its own kind of peace. I never wrote back. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, and even if they are, I'm not the one crossing them first. My life now, it's built on different foundations. Not guilt, not obligation, not keeping the peace at my own expense, but honesty, intention, and fierce, uncompromising love. Ethan still draws dragons. His latest one breathes blue fire and has Madison's name etched into the wings. She laughed when she saw it, then framed it on her bedroom wall. Dragon continues to grow. Monthly meetings, support calls, emergency legal funds. I speak at panels now. Women ask me how I stayed strong, and I always say the same thing. I didn't stay strong. I broke. I bent. I cried on the floor more times than I can count. But I rebuilt. Not to prove anything to my parents, not to get Nathan to acknowledge the damage, but for Madison, for Ethan, and for me. Because the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It's reclaiming your peace, your purpose, and your voice. And writing a story where you are never erased again. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Watched your own family align with someone who once made you feel small, afraid, or invisible? Brooke's story isn't just about a custody battle. It's about reclaiming truth. About how manipulation can wear the face of tradition, and betrayal can speak in soft voices while dismantling your world. But more than anything, it's about what happens when a woman stops shrinking herself to keep the peace, and starts building a life that honors her own worth. When Brooke uncovered the guardianship scheme, she didn't beg, she didn't break, she prepared, she fought, and ultimately, she reclaimed her voice, her family, and her future. So, here's our question to you. Have you ever had to stand up to betrayal, especially when it came from those you once called family? Share your story in the comments below. And if Brooke's journey lit something inside you, hit that like button and subscribe to Veiled Fury for more true stories of women who rise, women who refuse to be silenced, and women who turn pain into power. Because the hardest battles aren't always loud. Sometimes, they happen in the quiet moments between love and loyalty. But here's the truth. Some betrayals require more than forgiveness. They require fire. And every mother deserves to roar. Every single time.